of housekeeping. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As before trickling in, we can please enter the gallery view to optimize your viewing experience for this webinar, and the instructions are listed here on the screen. And before we begin, I just want to mention that this event will be recorded, so if you need to leave at any point during the events, you can see this recording on our YouTube channel at a later date. And I'll just give it a few more minutes before we get started here. All right, awesome. Looks like all of our panelists are here to join us so we can officially get started with the panel. Hi again, everyone, and welcome to VESS V6 Specialized Groups events on away rotations and vascular surgery. Thank you so much for all the panelists and all of the participants for joining us this evening. This panel is designed by medical students and for medical students. I know we have a lot of questions about rotations around this time of year. So we're very excited to learn more from our panelists tonight. Next slide. Um, and for those of you who might not be familiar with our organization, the VESS VSIG was started as a national forum for students interested in vascular surgery to participate in, especially for students who don't have a home VSIG program at their institution, so they can receive continued vascular exposure and mentorship. And our specialized team aims to reach people in their M3 and M4 year, people who are considering specializing in vascular surgery. And today's event is sponsored by the specialized team. My name is Karen Yuan. I am an M3 at Loyola Church School of Medicine, and I'm one of the student moderators today. So just the agenda for this meeting. We'll start with introducing the panelists and then moving on to the student moderated panel discussion portion of it, and then ending with some key takeaways and opening up the floor for questions from participants. So I have the great opportunity to introduce our faculty and residents panelists today. Our faculty panelist will be Dr. Velasquez. She joined the Atrium Health Wake Forest practice in 2014 after completing her training in general surgery at Emory University, followed by a vascular surgery fellowship at the University of Florida. She is currently the program director for the Integrated Vascular Program and the Vascular Fellowship Program at Wake Forest School of Medicine, and we're very honored to have her join us today. Next, we have Dr. Shim. She is originally from Chicago. She received her undergraduate degree from Ohio State University and her master's from Case Western. She attended medical school at Central Michigan University, and she is currently a integrated PGY1 resident at Northwestern. Joining us as well is Dr. Luo. He is originally from Brooklyn, New York. He received his undergraduate degree from Georgetown University and his MD from New York Medical College. He's currently an integrated PGY1 at MGH. Moving on to our wonderful student panelists, Nidhi received her MBA in computer science from Boston University, and she's currently an M4 at California North State's School of Medicine. She took a research trip at Northwestern and did AWACE at Northwestern, Stanford, and UCSF. And then we also have Sahaj joining us. He is an M4 at Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine, and he went to college at Dartmouth where he majored in computer science and biology. He did AWACE at UPenn and Dartmouth. Thank you to our outstanding panelists tonight who will be sharing their insights and experiences. Next, I'll pass it on to Estefania, our other student moderator, to talk about what goes into applying for an away rotation.
Hi everyone, I am Stefania Narvaez. I am a first-year medical student at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, and then I did my undergrad at Wake Forest University and did a Bachelor's of Science in Health and Exercise Science. So yeah, thank you panelists. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We'll get started with our Q&A on applying for an away rotation of vascular surgery. Throughout this event, we'll direct the questions to the panelists for an initial response, but if you want to chime in, please feel free to add anything. We're hoping that this can be an open discussion with some back and forth. So, before we start going into the nitty-gritty of an away rotation, how necessary it is to do an away rotation, recent data from the AP-DVS meeting show that almost 40% of students match at a home or an away sub by institution. So we thought this were a great fact to sort of share. We'll get started with the first question, which is how necessary is to do an away rotation. We can get started with maybe Dr. Velasquez.
All right, thank you for putting me on the spot, Stefania. It's so great to be here, and you guys do such a great job of just telling Dr. Hyun that it's incredible to see all that you have accomplished and how organized you guys are. And I see a lot of familiar faces, and that makes me so happy. So you just kind of said it, Stephanie. I mean, I think 40% is a big number, right? And we've known this data for a little while now. So I think that's one of the reasons why away rotations, I believe, they're so important. I do think that if you are thinking of probably going to a different region or considering different institutions where you're from or that you're not familiar with, it's very important that you do an away rotation for a couple of reasons. One, you can just really get to see what other environments are like, what other programs are like, different from the ones that maybe you have in your own institution. Maybe you don't even have a residency at your place, so you do want to see how that works. And two, if you are very interested in moving away from the region you're at and matching in that particular area, I think that's a very compelling reason as to why you should do an away rotation for sure. I'm sure there's many other reasons as well. You know, people think about when an away rotation can be really good, but also can be really bad. So you got to be prepared to do the best job you can do because, you know, if you do a bad job, obviously, you know, you can forget that you're going to go there for sure. But I think for the most part, you guys do such a great job when you go away and you really put your very best foot forward. And I do think that have to be thoughtful about where do you go and which regions you're interested and just really go from there.
Awesome, thank you. I know that's common misconception about where to go away, whether you want to stay close to home or maybe venture out to different regions. So that's great to know. Thank you, Dr. Velasquez. Now, we want to move on to Dr. Shim.
Yeah, kind of going on the same vein of Dr. Velasquez. I actually came from a smaller institution that didn't have a vascular rotation or a vascular service or any really vascular surgeons that had come from my school. So doing away rotations was very, very important. I ended up making a pretty drastic change from what I originally thought that I was going to go into. And so the away rotations ended up serving even more of a greater purpose for me. I ended up doing 4 of them back to back, very last minute. Not sure if I would recommend that necessarily, but I think that, you know, if you have a home institution, maybe you don't have to do as many. But like Dr. Velasquez said, I definitely did have to put my best foot forward. It is a very, very hard month. You are kind of putting 110% on for, the entirety of that month. But that being said, it was very rewarding. I did actually end up matching at one of the places that I did my away rotations at. So just in terms of networking and getting your name out there, letters of recommendation, just getting to really know the field and knowing what it's like to kind of hit the ground running and get your feet wet, and actually understanding what the day of a vascular surgery resident and attending life is. It was a very important experience.
Thank you. Now we go to Dr. Louis.
I feel like so much of what I wanted to say has already been said by Dr. Velasquez and Dr. Shim, but just wanted to emphasize that I did 3 OA rotations, and I think it's very necessary, like they said, if you want to go into a specific geographic location. I, for one, wanted to stay within the Northeast, and it was either going to be Northeast or actually somewhere in like the south along the East Coast. So I tailored my away rotations to be there as well. But I know that several of my classmates I know one of them who is interested in like the potential combination of robotics and robotic surgery into vascular surgery. So he also did aways at like Methodist and places like that were on the forefront of things like that. So in addition to tailoring your away rotations to your geographical preferences, it's also important to tailor whatever specific niche interests you may have. Although if your interests are as broad as, let's say, limb salvage or aortic work or endovascular work, you're going to find a large amount of that more or less wherever you go.
Thank you. Okay, now for the second question, how many aways would you suggest doing? I think we could hear from the current fourth years, and if they want to add about how necessary did they find to do an away rotation, that would be great since they're probably fresh out from that experience. So we could start with Nidhi.
Yeah, sure. I personally did 3 aways, but I'm like Sharon, I didn't have a home institution, didn't come from a place that had any really vascular rotations available to me. So I think doing 3 was great for me. I think if I did a fourth, I don't know how Sharon did it, but I don't think I would have done well. I mean, I think I would have, charged through, but it was nice to kind of complete my third away and then have some time to work on my application. So I guess it kind of depends what your timeline looks like in terms of how your fourth year school schedule works. I think if you have a home program, I see most often that people do too, and so I think those are good numbers. Aways are a great time. I really loved all of my aways, and you kind of get the best, I think, of Vascular because you get all the great cases without the pressure or burden of being a senior fellow and resident, and you learn so much. So I wouldn't be scared of doing them. They're really an exciting opportunity, especially if you're all here. You're obviously interested in vascular, like I was, and so yeah, I would say 2 to 3 is kind of a sweet spot. I know some folks have kind of financial or geographic limitations. So if those are things that you're worried about, there certainly have been applicants that I met throughout the season and cycle that have only done one, or just have their home sub I. And I think there is merit to doing that as well.
Thank you. Sahaj, you want to go next?
Yeah, I definitely echo all the comments. I personally did 2 away rotations. So I did a home sub I in June and then one in July and one in August. I think it's a great benefit, for me personally, when I was deciding where to apply, it was sort of geographical diversity, but also, thinking about, where can I see myself going? And I think that's a big thing where, if you're deciding about places, really taking the time to think about, where you want to go, because you really get to spend a month there. You really get to like sort of figure out the ins and out of a program much more than you would than on a regular interview day. And so trying to figure out where you want to go, geographical diversity, and then I think in terms of away rotations, like Nidhi said, it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of work, but you also like make a lot of connections. You get to spend time with residents, often like one-on-one settings, and you really get to figure out the location outside of work. And I think it can be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's great that we highlight that, whenever you choose to do these rotations, you have to also think about interviews, right? For residency, I've heard that November tends to be a busy month for fourth year, so perhaps trying to schedule around that. But I want to circle back to the timeline that the application looked like. How did you figure it out? How to apply? When did you hear back? And if you believe that essentially turning down an away rotation would look bad. So could we circle back to you, maybe talk about your experience?
Yeah, I think probably around now is when I started applying. Um, I think by like February, I had kind of figured out where I wanted to do my sub-Is, and I think it's good to be really intentional about it because a lot of the times, as long as you apply pretty early, you will get them. And that was the advice I had gotten previously. So I would apply to a few and start with that and make your decisions based on that so that you don't put yourself in a position where you have to turn away an array rotation. Um, I think I ultimately applied to four. I got all four of the ones that I applied to. I chose not to do the fourth one, so I didn't ever accept it, but I did kind of withdraw my application from doing that fourth one. For what it's worth, I still got an interview from that place, so um, I know there's a lot of like question about will they not interview, will they not? I didn't accept it and like turn them down later, so I think that would be a little bit worse. But I think as long as you're transparent about, being where you want to be with yourself, and then also just letting programs know, okay, I've already committed myself and I won't be able to make this one anymore. Is important to do that as soon as you can. And if you already know that you can't make something, like withdraw your application from ESLO or whatever it is as soon as possible. I think that's appreciated. I would say, yeah, my back to kind of question three, my applications were mostly March to April. I think by the end of April, I'd been done. My one piece of advice here is it's more than anything, the application is really just first come, first serve in my experience. So just get your application in as soon as they open. And I would always send an email to the coordinator being like, hey, I just submitted my application. Please let me know if there's anything else you need. And I think that just creates like another point for which they recognize your name by.
You. And now to maybe touch base with one of the current residents, Dr. Louis, do you want to share your experience applying to Aways?
Sure. One thing I want to do before I touch base on that is just that I was going to type this into the group chat. In the event where if you're asked about why you turned down an away invitation that you had applied to during the interview trail, just because I was asked that question during my interview trail, I was very honest with them and I told them that at that time I was very interested in doing an away year program, but because I had accepted a previous offer, it would not have been right to renege on that offer to join you the same way how I wouldn't want to renege on your offer to join someone else. So just being honest with them and being straightforward about your intentions and about what your priorities were at that time seems to have worked really well for me.
Thank
And just to answer your question, I think your question was asking about my specific experience about applying to Aways.
Yes.
Um, the application to Aways through the VSIG system is a little bit difficult just because different programs open at different times. And there's not actually one localized area where you can find out all the release dates. So once in a while, you just have to set an alarm on VSLO, and when they become available, they become available. I've also gotten a good amount of responses when I asked program coordinators of different residency programs I was interested in if they had any idea what the schedule was about when they'd be potentially open to having people apply for their away rotations. Of course, like I didn't want to bother every single program coordinator, but I only did this for the very few that I was really interested in, just because I didn't want to potentially miss the day that the visual applications had opened up.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really great. I know some programs have already sent out acceptances, and for other programs that have not even open applications. So it's great information for the medical students to know. I think we've kind of gotten a little bit of feedback as well on where you chose to rotate everyone here. So I kind of want to circle back to Dr. Velasquez and ask her opinion as a program director on question number 4, how you see it as a program director for medical students who turn down an away rotation.
I think it depends on the reason why you turn it down. No, think when you don't have a good reason or a justifiable reason, it kind of looks like your program is not, important enough for you to make the effort to go, which is fine. You don't have to show up and you don't have to come and see our place. But if it was one of those things that were not planned, and I think this goes back to what Nidhi was saying before, I think you really need to be thoughtful about how you're planning your away rotations, because you don't want to be in a situation when you have 4 or 5 rotations away. It's really difficult, right? It's not just time, but it's money that you're spending away, and you have to also make it to your interviews and so forth. So if you tell me, oh, I'm not gonna be able to show up because I have too many interviews that month and I'm not gonna be able to make it, well, that's bad planning, and it does look bad, to be honest. But if you tell me, I've had a family issue, health issues, of course, things happen, and we totally agree with that. When it becomes bad planning, I think that does look bad, just because it makes the program feel like it was not a priority for you. And that is okay if it's not a priority, but that spot could have been for someone that really wanted to make it that, to that particular program. So for that reason, I think it's so important to be transparent, as she said. And as Aiden also mentioned, just kind of plan ahead for where you want to be. I mean, if you live in the East Coast, want to stay in the East Coast, there's no reason why you should be doing like 2 rotations in the West Coast that you unlikely going to match there. I mean, if you don't have any regional constraints, I mean, for sure, but I think it's sometimes unrealistic that you will end up doing that just because. So you want to have a good reason why you're doing things and just plan ahead. So I would say that's the kind of most important thing. Have yourself be prompt and intentional about how you plan your rotations. Apply as soon as those are available. Go to places where you're genuinely interested in going. But this is an interview. This is like a live interview. People are looking at you. Aiden's here or Sahash here because they probably want to come to our program if we decide to, if we rank them high, whatever. So that's why you kind of be serious. It's a job interview as well. So it's not like, I'm just like showing up and visiting to say hi. So I think it just reflects the planning and and how genuine you are about to being in a specific place. And for us as program directors can be really hard too. Now in the virtual era, as you guys kind of grew up on this and we kind of had to adapt to it, which is fine, but that has also allowed for you guys to apply to so many programs and interview to so many programs, which I think is great. I love that part of things, but I also think it's hard for us to kind of gauge, some of the interest, and I think that's why, we try to meet as many people as we can, virtually to kind of gauge that interest. And, it's always so good to see you guys, and we want to increase our workforce and want to keep as many as we want and can. But I think this away rotation is such a thoughtful way for you to plan ahead and then just be really intentional about those particular programs that you're really interested in seeing. You may go and you may not like it, which is great too. At least you say, well, like, absolutely don't want to come to this place. And, that's good that I did it. And it's also true that you cannot do 10 away rotations. That's not possible. But I think because there's so many programs that have away rotations that are so competitive, you may not be able to go to the ones that you want because, they're filled ahead of time. But for those that you get, you're going to show up, you do a great job. And then again, just be genuine about your interest.
Yeah, I think like a takeaway, it's being very intentional about setting up your aways because it essentially sets you up for success during the interview season during 4th year. Thank you, Dr. Velasquez. Dr. Shem, do you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to reiterate also like just how important it is to like really make those calculated decisions, just because like, where you pick your away rotations do kind of dictate, where, if you are getting a letter of recommendation, that will dictate like the geographical location of the impact of that letter that they may have as well. So, if you're doing an away rotation in California, but you really want to end up in New York, they're going to be like, why did you do an away rotation in California? So just be like, everything that you make a decision in this process, like it carries a lot of weight, which is which is a little, it can be a little scary and a little bit intimidating. So just to be intentional. And then like Dr. Velasquez said, the entire month that you're doing an away rotation is a performance. It is essentially an interview. So, get there early, stay there late, always check in, make sure that you're doing everything that you can to show that you're a team player and you're a hard worker.
Thank you. Yeah, and Dr. Hahn was every medical student to go to New York, so make note of that as well. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this question's once again a little bit for Dr. Velasquez specifically, but if the students have experience, once again, please feel free to share. But question for Dr. Velasquez, should students reach out to the PD or coordinator for ways that they're interested in to express interest?
I would say yes, absolutely. Coordinators want to know that you're interested. They get a request for, VSLO, so many students and so forth, but the ones that go out of their way to make sure that they get that spot, catch your attention. I would say, a lot of the times I met some of you at the residency fair or any other events at other societies, and you just send me an email and say, hey, I met you in this meeting, stuff like that. I would love to come in a rotation. I applied to VSLO. Thank you for considering. Like, it just puts you in my radar right away. And not to say that I wouldn't consider others, but it's just, again, that thoughtful step that you take, and coordinators definitely love that too. So yeah, definitely you should do that. That doesn't mean that you have to send 10 emails. Do not do that. Send one. Yes.
Right, that wouldn't help with the first impression.
Yeah.
Do any of the medical students want to share? Did they reach out to anyone?
Yeah, I always send an email after I submit an application, just like Nibi, to the program coordinator, just letting them know, hey, submitted my application. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. And then it's also nice because then that also establishes some connection with the program coordinator. And so once you hear back and say there's a scheduling issue, or like if a month doesn't work for you, you can always sort of reach back and connect with that program coordinator, asking if there's a different date that might work for you. And so that's a good connection point as well.
Thank you. So now moving on to question number 3. Advice for international medical students. I don't know if we have any international medical students on the call right now, but I know that's a common problem that we run into for residency applications and aways. So if anybody wants to share, maybe Dr. Velasquez. Needy? Yes.
I will say I don't have a lot of experience. I don't fall in this category, but I can kind of just pass along things I've heard. I think for the international folks, especially going to conferences, I've heard has been really, really helpful for some of the friends I've made last year and this year that were international students. If any of you are those, I'm happy to put you in touch with those that have matched, and I think they might have better advice than I would. But I think going to conferences really helps them network with program directors and help secure some of those away spots because it can just be harder. So just start early and reach out to people and send emails based on the connections you make at conferences.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. I think as you know, there's a lot of meetings that are very friendly to medical students and trainees, and that networking opportunity is very easy to make. And just like VESS, for instance, or the residency fair, like networking fair, we're calling it this year, for you guys to show up to every booth, introduce yourselves, share your phone cards with your contacts and whatever, which I learned that's last year. I was like, oh, I didn't do that. So it's really cool. And I remember, I do remember, and I do agree that I'm an international student, I guess, myself, trying to come train after doing medical school in if you always live in a different country, did medical school in another country, it can be a little harder. It's just the process. It is what it is, and we are aware of that. But for that reason, having to establish more connections in different settings and networking opportunities are really helpful for you just to be visible. And that's basically what it is. International students are as competitive as you guys, and they're gonna be as great as you guys are, as so it's just a different process, and it's just the way the system works. We're not saying it's fair or unfair, it's just the way it is. So I agree that making those connections ahead of time, networking opportunities, emails, just to at least get your door to do this rotation. Because I do think that if you were to do an away rotation or a couple of away rotations as an international student, that's huge. And not just because obviously you kind of finally get that door open for them to know how hard you want to work or how good you're going to be, but also the other students will see you, they'll talk about you, say that you're really good. The residents will talk about you, they'll tell their friends from other residencies. So it's just like that chain of events that happens afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. Velasquez. And then for the last question, how to make away rotations more affordable or cost effective? Sahaj, I'm gonna pick on you. Do you want to share how that went for you?
I don't know if I'm the best person for this, but I will say, first is be very proactive about finding housing options. So as soon as you hear back and you confirm that you want to go to this place, think about, where you want to live. Because I think, as sort of you get closer and closer, the housing does get very expensive. And the second part of it is, I think you can always sort of leverage connections and, friends, family that you might have, and, making sure that you know, try to leverage whatever cost that you can save from staying at different places. I think that's one way to make it more cost effective. Unfortunately, a lot of these away rotations are expensive. Like I definitely spend more than, $1,000 per month for rent for each month that I was there for my away rotation. And so it does add up. But I think if you like share housing, if you know other people who are doing, rotations in the same place, and if you are proactive in finding housing, that can really help alleviate some of the cost.
Thank you. Also be aware of like scholarships for certain groups as well. Now, LMSA has one for general surgery, but you can apply it towards and away in vascular, which is awesome. Okay, I think that wraps up my part. Now I'm gonna pass it on to Estefania Rivera, who will be talking about the away experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Estefania Rivera. I am a second year medical student at the University of Puerto Rico. I did my undergrad at Cornell. I studied human biology, health, and society. And yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about the OA experience and ask some questions to the panelists so we can move on to the next slide. Awesome. So the first question is, what advice can you offer students on succeeding during away rotations? And I think this would be a good question for residents. So if Dr. Shim wants to chime in. Yeah.
I think that definitely being prepared when you get to, don't just like waltz in, never having even like Googled, what the surgery is, just like basic steps, especially with like AI nowadays. It's really nice to just like, see a big picture, lots of YouTube videos, know your anatomy, and most importantly of all, I would say know your patient. So, know everything about them, know what type of surgeries they've had, their past medical history, what type of medicines they're taking, blood thinners, et cetera, et cetera. In a lot of places, at one of my away rotations, they would have the medical students or the subis help with like the pre-op. And that include like ABIs and stuff like that. So just like, learn how to do an ABI or something really quickly before. But just don't waltz in, don't ever go into an OR without knowing as much as you can about the surgery and the patient and everything like that. It's just not only is it unsafe, but it also just doesn't look that great either. So that would probably be my biggest advice.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great advice. So with that said, I think we can move on to the next question. So what did your daily schedule look like? Were you expected to take call? So I think Needy can answer this, or maybe Sahash, whoever wants to chime in, I think would be a great opportunity.
Sure. So for me, my daily schedule, it really depended on, where I was at, very institution dependent, but I would like come in like 5:30, and then a lot of the places, there's an expectation of, whether it's pre-round or not, and it really depends on the residents, and, definitely try to find out like what their workflow is and how you can fit in. But I would like, definitely prepare on, the patients I was following. I think one thing you can always do is like, be ready to like, make sure that the sort of whatever wound package or whatever is there for your patients that you're following, and you sort of anticipate whatever wound dressings they might need during rounds so that it's ready to go. And then, I would sort of try to go to OR sort of rest of the time. And I would spend sort of one of the days of the week in a clinic. I think it's a great time for you to sort of spend, one-on-one time with an attending, and really get to see patients, outside of the operating room. I wasn't really expected to take call. I did used to work, one of the weekends. I would like work 6 days and then have one day off. But then I would always offer to sort of stay back, and if there is a case sort of late in the evening that's really interesting, it's always nice to if you're interested, and if you show enthusiasm and stick around.
Great. That sounds really good. makes sense. It depends on the institution and what their expectations are regarding like medical students in their last year. So for our third question, I think we have how was your away experience working with another sub-bi on the same rotation? Um, so if anyone wants to comment on this, I think we had a discussion yesterday, and some students had the experience that they were like in a sub-bi and there was another student with them in the same sub-bi. Some of them did not. So maybe Needy, did you have this experience when you were in your sub-bis?
Yeah, don't take this for granted. This is actually really, really important in the way that you handle yourself around with other students. I think I think two out of the three that I was on, I was with other students, and so just being mindful on how you can work together as a team. You're not competing. There's room for everyone to match. So I know it feels like there isn't, but I think if you have that mindset, that really helps. Like to the level that when I interviewed with one of the places that I was sub-I at, the chief and PD both commented on specifically how well we work together as a team. So I think that's something where, it's just basic courtesy to be a good student and work well on a team. And that's really what they want to look for is like, do we like you enough that we can work with you day in and day out? And so, your knowledge is important, but how much you can be a teammate and work together is also equally important. So I would really be mindful whatever you can do to kind of make sure that you guys are all on the same page, work together beforehand, figure out who's doing what part of rounds or who's on what patients and monitoring all that. I think just having that good communication between you and the other students is super, super important.
Yeah, awesome. I definitely agree with that. I feel like sometimes we get overly competitive even with our peers, and sometimes it's good to like step back and reflect on, the fact that medicine is literally a team and we depend on each other. It's not really about who's better than who. So thank you so much for sharing. And our last question in this slide is what resources did you use or find helpful to prepare? How did you study for your ways? I think they sent a resource right now in the chat, but if Dr. Louis wants to comment on this or Needy again, whoever, I feel like you guys have done it recently, so maybe you have more thoughts on this, or maybe things have changed.
So the resources I use to prepare for my ways are pretty much the same resources I use now to prepare for cases. Houston Methodist has a wonderful playlist of operations that you can look on that walk through things. There are also several textbooks as well that are very, very useful. But I've relied heavily on Houston Methodist's YouTube videos to walk me through different surgeries and what to look out for, as well as I think I've re-referenced Netters as well to look at the anatomy and make sure I understand how things go. And as you go through the training in vascular, you're going to find so many other textbooks that maybe go into the vascular exposure, all these things that may be a little bit more advanced for what you guys are trying to accomplish on a sub-I. But it never hurts to understand the anatomy, understand the steps of the surgery, and more importantly, like Dr. Shim said, understand the patient and why they're there, because that's ultimately what's most important for you at your level.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And thank you for providing those resources, I think. And the people that are sending all the messages in the chat, so I'll definitely be saving those for my future. And I wanted to ask Dr. Velasquez real quick about her perspective about what specific advice does she have for students in succeeding in doing away rotations. I think we got a good idea on like the student perspective, but I would also like to know if she has any thoughts about what makes a student like stand out. And I think it ties in well with our next question on the next slide. So yeah, Dr. Velasquez, if you have any opinions.
Sure, I think I agree with most that has been said. Particularly, I think, being a team player is super important. You really, as program directors, rely a lot on, what our trainees and residents and other medical students experience with our visitors, right? We all in general want them to succeed, and it's just so important to take that in consideration. The last thing you want to do is one that just feels like the need of just wanting to shine and putting others down or whatever. That's just not really the way to go. Vascular surgery is a team sport. And I think we all do that. Our own students, always welcome, always, I'm sorry. our own students welcome our visiting students and behave that way, and that's sort of like what we expect. Be prepared. I mean, I think you always will do that. It will be silly for you to show up not prepared and not wanting to work hard and all of that. So I think for the most part, everyone has that. Everyone shows up wanting to work, wanting to be part of the team and so forth. So I think just don't underestimate the team player aspect of visiting, and then it's just like behaving when you go to someone else's house, right? And show your personality, be genuine, be who you are, and then just work hard, play hard.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that advice and, giving us that perspective. I think it's really helpful for students to, hear a program director say those words. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay. Oh, is it the same?
This is the next slide.
Oh, this is okay. Awesome. Yeah, I think we already went over these questions, pretty sure. So maybe yeah, so I think I'm all done with my questions. But thank you so much for answering these questions and talking a little bit more about the experience and what to expect. I'll definitely be saving those resources and using them in my future as an M3. So I'm gonna let Karen continue with this part of the panel, but thank you so much, and it was great talking to all of you.
For sure. So I'll be wrapping up talking about what to do after one has completed an array rotation and some takeaways from that. Next slide, please. So for many of us considering doing an array rotation, securing strong letters of recommendations is a crucial step in building the residency applications. So for the first question, I'll ask Dr. Velasquez specifically, what advice can you offer to students on obtaining a strong letter of recommendation?
Yeah, I think like the first step is obviously, work hard, but let's just say everyone's working hard, doing a good job and so forth. I think you have to identify the faculty that you felt like you had more face time, that you felt like you had interactions that were meaningful, that you felt like you could, show yourself and, were in the clinic with them, did cases with them, and took call with them, etc. I think that sometimes, students may go to rotations and then just identify the one person that may have, like a big name or whatever, which is great, but they maybe just like said hi to them once, I mean, it's great to have a letter from those people that they may not know you as the one person who was working with you all of the time. So a lot of the times what happens is if you ask for a letter for someone that you didn't work much, what they do is rely on the residents and the residents and the other faculty to write that letter for you, which is very good. That's why you have to be a team player and be good to your staff, to your residents and so forth. But I think if you want someone to really advocate for you, to can speak to your character, to your work ethic, to the time that they spend with you, just find someone that you feel like you had that connection and those interactions that were strong. Definitely have to ask for a letter of recommendation for someone that you go on a away rotation. Sometimes I feel like when I talk to some applicants and they tell me they do an away rotation, but they didn't get a letter from there, I wonder as to why they didn't do that. And not to say that that's like an X or anything like that, but we wonder as to why, and we may ask you why, and just be prepared to answer that question.
For sure. Thank you, Dr. Velasquez. That's very, very good to know. And then Dr. Luo, would you have any things to add in terms of advice on getting good letters from attendings you worked with?
Absolutely. Once again, I echo a lot of what Dr. Velasquez said. I think one thing I wanted to add on her point about getting the importance of getting a letter of recommendation from an away rotation. I heard from a resident when I was doing a sub-I that getting a letter during a away rotation shows that not just that you're able to work hard and play hard, but you're able to integrate yourself well within a team and work well within circumstances that are constantly changing and new. A lot of what I've faced in residency is that like things are constantly changing every month as you're going on different rotations. You're being thrown into different teams, you may be on different services. And from the residents who I spoke to, his perspective was that the letter of recommendation from a 1 month rotation shows that you're able to adapt and accommodate to these changes and work well with whatever circumstances are around you. The other part I wanted to add was that in addition to what Dr. Velasquez said about the importance of working well with residents, in my email to whichever attending or faculty who I wanted a letter of recognition from, I always included these are several of the residents or faculty that I've worked with well, who are willing to vouch for my work ethic, character, XYZ. But I always make sure that I ask those other people first if I can include them in my email for this purpose, just so they're not blindsided. And just so I don't like to use their name for purposes for a letter.
For sure, and that sort of gives you the chance to, within the letter, have sort of perspectives from different teams that you've worked with and other attendings too. That's definitely a great point. And then second question, asking about how and when to ask for letters. Should we ask for the letter in the beginning of the rotation, at the end of it, both? Dr. Shim, would you have any insight into that?
Yeah, so I think depending on when you do your away rotation, this is actually super important. So I did a couple of my away rotations July, August, and then some actually in September, and I think it kind of even bled into like October, November, and ERAS is due in September. So in the rotations that I was able to do before ERAS was due, I was very upfront. I was like, "Hi, I'm Sharon. I am a medical student. I'm coming from a program that doesn't have a vascular rotation. I'm so excited to be here. I just want to learn as much as I can. I will be asking you for a letter. Obviously I wouldn't, introduce myself like that, but like, in the first like week or two, I'd be very transparent and be like, I'm seeking to learn as much as I can here. And in addition, I'm really hoping to get like a strong letter of recommendation. So any advice that you have to ensure that I am successful this month, just starting in the beginning, is greatly appreciated. Later on in the later months, after I had submitted ERAS, but I was still doing these away rotations, a letter of recommendation, a lot of the times, like these programs didn't really offer, nor did I really ask, but I was still there to just ask for advice. And you would be very shocked to see like how small the world of vascular surgery is, even without a letter of recommendation. Everybody talks, everyone knows each other. You go to conferences, everyone has been, co-residents, co-interns for decades, and everyone really knows each other well. So even if, you don't get a formal letter of recommendation, still having that person in your corner and having that network be strong is a very, very strong tool in your toolkit.
Yeah, for sure. I think just that's sort of the informal letters that you get just from interacting with attendings and then them talking to other attendings about like your work ethics and all of that. So that's awesome. Can move on to the next slide. So this question, how did away rotation impact what you looked for in the residency program? I think I'll ask the M4s, either Nidhi or Sahaj, if you have any insights into this.
Yeah. I remember when I started my rotations, Sharon actually told me, she was like, really consider programs that have podiatry. And my first away was at a place that didn't have podiatry. I didn't mind it. I was like, this is fine. Like, I mean, sure, but I don't think, and so I think having the experience of kind of diverse rotations can help you tease out how much those types of things matter to you. Ultimately, I think I'm okay still, but it was nice to actually experience what that might look like, and just kind of getting a sense for what type of sites do they rotate at and how far is your daily commute. I think those are the little things that are kind of thorns in your day-to-day life as a resident that might bother you or might not, and you'll realize that, okay, these aren't actually important to me. And then the other thing is kind of looking at what type of relationship might you have with the staff, and the culture at a program was really important to me, so that was something I really got to tease out when I was at a place. And then also kind of looking at research opportunities because that was something that was important to me. So I would say yes, it impacted what I looked at. I think it can be hard because you're so focused on being a good sub-I that you're forgetting that you're evaluating them as well. But just take as many notes as you can throughout your days, or take some moments to journal when you can. It's easy to forget how you felt. thankfully I had a lot of notes from when I was complaining or raving about my day-to-day life to my parents or my sister. So look back at those when it's time to rank. But I think ultimately, if you do a rotation, you decide you don't like it, I wouldn't view that as like, oh, I wasted a month or I wasted an opportunity. I think that's still very, very meaningful. You learn a lot, and it'll help you kind of craft how you want to interview throughout the season and where you want to be.
For sure. And then we can move on to the next question. And how did away rotations impact your interview or ranking experience? Sahaj, if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So I think, spending a month at a place, you definitely get to see the ins and outs and sort of the unfiltered sort of experience as you spend your month there about, what the inner workings are at a program, and what the culture is of the program. And I think that's super important. Um, I think for me, like spending a month there, I really got to, know the program and really understand the residents and, what their experience looked like. It's also great to, understand how the interns work and how well supported they are during their rotation as well. So for me, overall it was a very positive experience in terms of my interviews and thinking about what I want to prioritize out of getting in terms of ranking a program and where I see myself being at.
Right. And then moving on to the last questions, Dr. Velasquez, I'll direct this one to you. If you didn't do an sub-I at a program you're applying to, how does that impact your application? Or in other words, if you're still very strongly interested in a program, just given like some circumstances you weren't able to do an away rotation there, how would you still optimize your chances of getting an interview that program?
Yeah. I think I would see them as strongly as the people that, come and do a survival rotation. I mean, truth of the matter is like you cannot have so many students, right? And there are many reasons and factors as to why people may not be able to travel, etc. I think the away rotation obviously gives you advantage when it comes to probably maybe, ranking because people know you better and so forth. It's just the way it is, just like if there was for those places that maybe have in-person interviews for those programs, they may have a better sense of your personality and so forth they took to you in person maybe than it is. So I don't know. I don't think at all, and that's how I view it. And I know that many of my, fellow program directors don't feel like if you didn't know a rotation, we don't take you seriously. Not at all. I think we take you as seriously as everyone else. I think that we see our rotations as just opportunities to be able to, to increase your chances in potentially matching that particular place. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to go to other places. So I particularly don't put a lot of not at all any negative effect on that by any means. So I think that we take you as seriously as everyone is. You should still apply to all of the places that you think you would want to go, even if you didn't do an away rotation. And then just be genuine with your intent to go to those places. When you interview either virtually or in person, show why you want to be in that place or what you heard about it, and that's that. I mean, I think all of that counts for sure.
Yeah, that's really good to know, especially for students, me included, trying to figure out array of
Yeah.
rotations. Sometimes with scheduling and all of that can get really
Right. I mean, we
So,
get it. You guys are busy. You're trying, this is a super stressful. I mean, it's very exciting, but it's also stressful. And you're trying to figure it out. Like, you don't want to be seen as, oh my gosh, I really wanted to go to see this place, but I couldn't. And I think that you guys put a lot of pressure and stress on yourself. It's just probably the way you are. You're going to be a vascular surgeon. You try to be a perfectionist and do the best job you can. So I think that there's so much that is on your control. You just have to accept that. It's great if you have away rotations. It's awesome. It's awesome that you can get it, go have fun, enjoy yourself, do the best you can. But you also have to apply to many other programs too. So I think embrace that, and again, just whenever you interview, just be yourself and just show how much you want to be a vascular surgeon and how excited you would be to be in that particular program.
for sure, yeah, that's really great for everyone here to hear that, I'm sure. So then I think that is all the questions that people submitted. So we'll open up the floor now to questions from participants on this call right now, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
There's a question in the chat about getting a letter not from the senior doctors, but rather like a doctor that you worked well with. What would be your opinion on that?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, absolutely. I think if you felt like you had these connection and interactions, and you know how it is. I mean, it's just like when you find a friend or whatever that you're like, grinding together, doing cases together, and you feel like you could just really show yourself and have kind of a great experience. You absolutely should ask for it.
I also just sent my thoughts via chat. So
It also doesn't hurt that you could always ask this person what the process is for letters of recommendation. Maybe in this one program, it's the PD or the some big name is the one who writes it, but they'll collaborate with whichever attending that you want to or think would best vouch for you. So there's never any harm, especially if this is someone who you would initially go to a letter of recognition in the first place, by just asking them what the process is. And just understand that way you can get a little bit more information and it can help you make your decision.
And I will also say, as us as program directors, when we're reading a letter from someone that has really worked with you and felt like they really had a good experience with you, the way those letters are written is very different. So we can just really get a feel as to, this student worked really hard, they're team players, they're prepared. The way those interactions are described, they really come through in that letter. When someone maybe did not have the opportunity to work with you as much, that comes through too. And not to say that it's not as valuable, but I personally get a lot more for someone that worked with you more, and they can speak to your character and to those experiences that someone that says, oh, I heard they did very well, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
the
I have a
other thing,
question
like
for
one of,
Dr. I have
oh,
a
go ahead.
question for Dr. Velasquez. I do wonder though, there are some letters that people expect. For example, if there's a student who's applying from LSU, we expect to see like a Dr. Mal Shahan letter. If someone had done a away rotation at Wake Forest, we kind of expect to see like a Dr. Velasquez letter because, like you said, a lot of our community is so small. And I think, I do wonder, while we do say, go ask the person that, you work with the most, the letter for, I do think there are a couple of letters that I think we look for from some institution. I don't know if you do as well. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
No, I think that you have a very good point there. I don't, mean to dismiss that part of things, and I think that's important. Maybe it is that whenever you, work with that person, maybe you say that they put a good word for you for the program director or something. Oh, the other thing I have found that some students have done, ask if we could do like a combined letter, so like ask the program director and this other person that you work with to do that. But no, I agree with you, Dan. I think you have a very good point there that we do look for, like if you went and rotated with Dr. Han and I didn't see a letter, I will find it suspicious. But I could always call him. But yeah, no, I agree. I think you just have to take those things in consideration and just be thoughtful about how you ask for that, or like how can you ask that person that you really feel that could put a good word for you to see if they can work together with the PD or put a good work with the PD, or just say, I'm going to ask for a letter of the PD. Could you just put a good word for me whenever, before my rotation ends?
Yeah, and I think Aiden's point was probably spot on here in terms of like asking them what the process is, because in a lot of those kind of letters that we write, we try to incorporate as many people's inputs as possible into that letter. This is what the resident said. This is what this other attending said. Here is one story that we heard during their rotation, which was particularly reflective of who this individual is. So I think we tried to add as many tidbits as possible. And it's not necessarily like you don't have to worry because like say that you go during a month where there's a regional conference and your person that you're trying to get a letter from is gone for like 1 of the 4 weeks that you're out there, you still have the opportunity to get letters from that person, I think.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I was at a sub-I where I wanted a letter from the chief who was gone for a regional conference and then gone for vacation, but I had let them know in advance, like in my first week, that I was looking for letters from certain individuals, and I asked what I could do to accomplish that. And so just kind of setting your stage up properly from the get-go, even if you're not going to be able to work with them, they'll still work with you to figure out a way to get that information about you.
I think someone has their hand raised. Sungu, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, hello. Hi. My name is Sungwoo or William. So medicine from Rutgers Robert Johnson. Since we have some of the residents here, I just kind of wanted to ask, what are some of the most helpful tidbits or actions that you've seen from the med students who are away rotating at your places? And I just wanted to ask if there were any instances that you remember that kind of pop into your head, or anything sort of on the excellence side from the med students.
I would say, it's nice to be like super fresh as, I was literally just in M4 last year. And then just to be on the other side of everything this year. Um, I feel like during the away rotations, like the first week is always like really tough just because like it's a new city, it's a new hospital, new badging system, sometimes even new EMR. It's like everything is new. So just like spending the first month or week just like really absorbing how like the team works, like the workflow of everything, like where extra hands could always be used versus like where, you might not be super welcome, or just like recognizing patterns just because every rotation is going to be a little bit different. So the first week I would really just be very, very intentional of just trying to be aware of my surroundings and picking up on those patterns. And then as the month goes on, I would try to insert myself into like those places where I could see that, there was help that had to be that was needed. So I remember after like the second week, I noticed, we had a ton of wound vacs, and every single one of them are going to be changed on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I make it super intentional. By the second week, I'd be like, hey, I noticed that room, 17 has a wound vac and it's going to be changed today. Is it okay if I go ahead and tell the nurse that we're going to, need some pain meds before we go in and change it? Just to like show that you are being intentional, you're part of the team, you're noticing the patterns, and you're being proactive. So just like picking up on those little patterns here and there, it not only helps the team and helps the residents, and kind of shows that you're a part of the team and you're aware of everything and you're kind of being intentional with your decisions. So that's something that I noticed that med students did, and super helpful.
I think one thing that comes to my mind was I had a med student, and this was actually a couple of months ago, but basically he had a really good idea of when it was his time as like a med student on a sub-I to interact, to do things, and when it was not the right time. And the example I came up with was just that we were doing an endovascular case, and then something had gone wrong, and I had just seen the med student like take his hands off the table and just step back, and it was a very small thing, but he didn't have anyone tell him to get out of the way. He just recognized that the situation requires other people or more resources to be at hand. And he realized that his learning and his performance on a sub-I comes second to the patient care and what the patient ultimately needed. And I think it was a really small thing. I commented him on that. Just like understanding your environment, understanding that yes, you're there for your sub-I, you're there to show your best self. But at the end of the day, it's the patient that always comes first. And that I thought that was a really good thing, and I applauded him for that, to both when that happened and at the end of the sub-I.
Gotcha. Thank you both.
So yeah, I don't see any raised hands or questions in the chat. And just to be aware of everyone's time. Our panelists, any things that I know we cover a lot tonight, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to share with the students, or would it be okay if the students reach out later on for more questions? If you guys are willing to drop your emails in the chat so they can reach out later on if they have more questions too, that would be much appreciated. But if nothing else, this will be the end of the panel, and just want to thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And a huge thank you to Dr. Velasquez, Dr. Shim, and Dr. Louis and Nidhi and Sahaj for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak to us. We really appreciate all of your insights and advice. So for students, if you would like to learn more about our events and become involved with VESS VSIG, please email us at the email address listed above. And then we're always excited to have new member joining our team. As I mentioned previously, this recording will be uploaded to our VESS VSIG YouTube channel, so you can always refer back to it to tonight's session if you found it helpful. Then thank you once again to all of the panelists for attending this great event, and hope everyone have a great rest of their evening.